I found some really amazing mentors who were leaders in my industry, who were savvy, who were kind, who built nice things into me and really encouraged me. And then I got to understand that my vision was actually a thing. I wasn't like this pioneer, that people actually did this and did this well.
Welcome to a new episode of Most Memorable Journeys. This is actually the first recording that I do after my summer break, and I'm not sure if I remember how to go about this, but I think it's like riding a bicycle. I'm sure we'll be fine. I have a very fascinating lady today, a fellow traveler who I think breathes and lives for traveling. And she does a lot of things. She has a company that's called Bella Travel Planning. I'm not sure if it's company, but we'll talk about it. She's a luxury travel planner. She does tailored itineraries. She's a jet setter. She likes luxury. I do too. Most of the time I can't afford it, but I do. Welcome to Most Memorable Journeys, Becky Lukovic.
Hey, Elizabeth, thank you for having me on your podcast.
Well, it's a pleasure. When I was looking at the stuff that you do, I thought, why didn't I find you earlier?
And likewise, when I saw your profile on Instagram, I'm like, I need to know this woman.
But there is always, when it's time for things to happen, they will happen. Your name is, where are you? I mean, it's not a question that one should ask, but I'm going to ask it anyway, because anything that ends with ich is usually from the Balkans or ex-Yugoslavia.
True. And actually, it is my married name, or I'm no longer married, I'm divorced, but it was my ex-husband's name. And professionally, I grew a chunk of this business under that name. And so I kept it. Plus, it sounds very exotic. So
It does.
I decided to keep it.
Gives you something to talk about.
True story.
So tell me, you were born in the US, you grew up in the US. Many people in the United States never get a passport, and
True.
for a good reason, because it's a beautiful country and you can travel all your life. You still can see all the beautiful things and you don't have to go anywhere, but you did. How did it start?
Oh gosh. It started as far as the international travel piece. I'd always been a traveler in the US as a family. I grew up in Arkansas, so we had lakes and rivers and mountains and all that. And I loved that sense of adventure that my childhood brought me into. In my early 20s, one of my really good girlfriends had studied abroad in France in college, and I was very intrigued by that because I was like, oh, I don't know, international travel sounded great, but my parents never traveled internationally. I really didn't know anybody except for maybe on a cruise who had really done that a whole lot. And she and I hatched a plan to backpack through Europe. And I was 25, she was 26. And we spent almost a month with every belonging on our back, attached to us, everything, schlepping our stuff through Europe, no reservations, as one does when you're 25 in the 90s and backpacking through Europe. And that instilled in me this innate curiosity about the world. Because in my mind, how the world operated was not, when you're in Italy or Germany or France or wherever, it was so different. And the coins were different. And of course, the language was different. And then in so many ways, it was the same as well. And I fell in love with exploring other cultures through that experience.
Wow. Isn't that fascinating though? Because, what you were saying, I wasn't traveling. We weren't traveling. I grew up in a family where we didn't travel. And I have, it's like your friend who went to France. I had a cousin who had been an au pair in the US, and she came back and I thought, wow. And she
Yeah.
had sunscreen. I'm talking about 40 years ago, or I don't know. We didn't know anything. We lived in the countryside. We never knew any of these things. And it all looked so fascinating. Isn't it funny how we get affected by this one person sometimes, or by this one incident?
Yes, for sure. And how it just totally shapes your life's trajectory.
Yes, and
And
you're wanting to do that too.
yes. You want to do that too. You want to experience it. You want to, all the dishes that you've never heard about and you see, you're like, oh, I want to eat that and I want to eat that there. And the stories, I just wanted to insert myself in her stories.
Mm.
And so it's like, well, let's just create our own.
Tell me a little more about that trip through Europe, because that was was that pre-internet?
I mean, there was no really internet to really research. I think we had like a Prodigy account where there was message boards or something like that. But no, I mean, people still didn't have websites. That was 90, might have been 95.
Yeah, so it
Somewhere
was
around
kind of,
there.
there were cell phones, but there weren't smartphones.
Correct.
Yeah.
And actually, and I don't know if we had cell phones yet, or if we did, it was the bad kind that was in the car. So, we were armed with a phone card, one of those prepaid phone cards where you'd
Mhm.
find a payphone so you could call home.
Mhm.
And we just, we had we had a few guidebooks that we had tore the pages out of, and we had I still had the itinerary in my scrapbook, but we had crafted this itinerary of things we wanted to see. And just in my mind, we were going to stay in hostels the whole time. That really didn't work out as I thought. It wasn't as glamorous as I had in my mind. And so, so we upgraded to, super cheap hotels with a bathroom down the hall. And so we were splurging. But yeah.
Yeah, and those hostels have changed too. I mean, in today's world, there are some really, really nice ones that are probably nicer than the hotels that you stayed at then. But
Exactly.
things are changing. So you can say that this trip to Europe really opened up your desire or your appetite for wanting more.
For sure. Absolutely. And we were two 20-year-old women. We didn't have a phone. We had our backpacks, we had our savvy, we had traveler's checks, and we saw the world without a reservation.
Mhm.
And when I got back, I had such a sense of empowerment that, okay, well, how do I figure this out? Because when
Yeah.
you're traveling like that, sometimes you can't easily find a hotel room, or you get on the wrong bus and then suddenly you're out in the countryside and you were trying to get to somewhere in the city. And it's like, okay, well, how do we figure this out? And I think it really instilled in me this, and reinforced. I probably already had it, but reinforced in me this resilience.
Mhm.
Um, and not in a like, oh, I'm struggling kind of way, but it's like, okay, well, what's plan B or C?
Mhm.
Let's do it. What
Mhm.
what can we do?
Yeah, I think it's this confidence that you start building up. I was a tour guide when I was that age, and I'm older than you, so it was way before. That was way before the internet or any of these things. And you just don't have any choice. I knew how to change a tire. I don't know if I
Yeah,
could do
me
it
too.
today, but there was no other option. Now you have a million options. And I think the other problem in today's world with all the social media is that you get affected by people, by the things that people say. Even if you had a plan and you think this is a good plan, but then you hear all these things and it may actually affect you, and you may feel more insecure than before.
For sure. I think it can go both ways. I think it can make you more secure and more, it can give you information, but yes, it can definitely, if you let it get in your head, it can definitely cause self-doubt. It can cause you to pivot and then you just wonder what if. Yeah, it can really do that.
This was not your job. It wasn't your work at the time. It
Not
was
then.
just a trip. But then I read somewhere, and I don't remember where now, but you were somewhere on a bridge, I think, and you were looking at something, and you said to yourself, I think, did I read that right?
You did. You did. I was on it. It may have been my second, no, my third trip, I think. My third trip to Europe. And I was with my then husband. And then we had planned this amazing trip to Italy down the Amalfi Coast. And it was perfection. And I had spent hundreds of hours researching. And again, it was still you had things on the internet, but it was not, the information was not like today. It was not as, I mean, these days I can pull something on Instagram and see pictures and read reviews and all that. And it was still more challenging. So, hundreds and hundreds of hours. And I'm like, this was perfection. And I think I could do this for a living. I had done large events, coordinating large events on a volunteer basis, like in stadiums and things like that. I knew I could piece things together. I knew all that. And I thought, I'm going to do this. And then I'm like, who's going to hire me? I have no experience. Everything I knew about a travel agent was they wanted to sell me a cruise, Disney, or a bus tour. And I was not interested. I was too cool for school for any of that. Not that there's anything wrong with that. That just wasn't my jam in my, I think, early 30s. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to get a little bit of education and I'm just going to start my own business and I'm going to be a consultant for people who want to travel like I like to travel. And that was the beginning. The first iteration of my company was called On the Go Travel. And then after a number of years, we rebranded to Bella because Bella was beautiful. And I thought I resonated more with beauty than, go, go, go. So.
Yeah, well, maybe also you wanted to go a little slower, so you wanted it more Bella than more go. So
for sure.
Yeah. And did you find clients? How did it work? How did you, because this is the famous imposter syndrome, isn't it? When we think we're not good enough, but you definitely were.
Oh, for sure. It took a while. I definitely, it was organic growth. I definitely, the first year or two, made a little money. I would do anything. It's like, you want a car rental? You want to stay in the Hampton Inn? Okay, fine, I'll do it. But I would meet people and I would talk about travel and I found some really amazing mentors who were leaders in my industry, who were savvy, who were kind, who built nice things into me and really encouraged me. And then I got to understand that my vision was actually a thing. I wasn't like this pioneer, that people actually did this and did this well. And then I became fascinated on how they did it. And I would ask them endless questions. And so as I learned, my clientele grew. And it probably took, I'd say 3 to 5 to really see profit. I would say, I think that's in line with most businesses. And then, I mean, fast forward now, it's 20 some odd years later, and we sell multi-million in sales. So yeah, so I'm really proud of how I started. But yeah, it's been a fun ride.
Yeah, but I think this is very, very wise what you were just saying. And I think it's important for people who are listening. It's not something that you do overnight. You're not going to make $1 million with in the first year, well, unless you're, I don't know, you're really, really lucky and something special happens to you. But generally, it takes a while. And you were saying that you were talking to people who were savvy and kind. And I want to ask you, I have learned in life that people who are really successful and who are savvy and experienced, they are kind and they love to share. I think it's the ones who are not so good or not so, I don't know, who are arrogant about it. Is that your experience as well?
I haven't thought about it till you just brought that up. I do believe that when you allow yourself to become more fear-based in your thinking, then you do close off to people because you don't want to share. Because what if I share and they take my great idea and they run with it and they do better than I do? And I think that's fear-based.
Totally. Yeah.
Right. And I think that people who say, let's make our industry better together and work together collaboratively and give freely, it makes everyone better.
Totally. And it makes the world better as well.
Yeah.
I mean, it just makes everything better. And so many people don't understand that when you live in this tiny little cocoon and you think you're the only one who knows anything. And instead of giving, because we also know that the more you give, the more you get.
True story. Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, now I'm looking here at my notes. I was going through a few things that you did. And one thing that caught my attention, I don't think I've ever had anybody on my podcast. You went to see the gorillas in Uganda.
I did last November. I had the opportunity to go to Uganda and go gorilla trekking and chimpanzee trekking. And that has been on my life list for so long. And I was so excited when I got that opportunity. It was glorious.
Tell me more. Tell me, how does it, how do these trips happen? I mean, you fly to, tell me everything.
Sure, sure. We flew into Entebbe, which is
Yeah.
the big city there. And so we spent a couple of days in Entebbe. And the owner of the company that I went with, he is from there, and his mother started a school there. So we visited the school and all that. And then we experienced many things in Uganda. They have safaris with lions and elephants and leopards and all the footed horned, antelope looking things. And so we went on safari for a couple of days there. We went chimpanzee trekking, which was, I didn't know how amazing that was till I'm in the middle of it. And you're off trail. We had this amazing, strong Ugandan woman who was our guide. And we are off trail. We're going through, it's kind of boggy, swampy. You're up to your knees sometimes in mud. And I mean, you just feel very, I felt very, I guess, empowered. Here I am.
And
I'm
connected.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they stop, you watch them, and chimpanzees are hunters. They hunt other monkeys. So you do feel like your heart is right there. And it's kind of intimidating to see them because they will just like stare at you and you're like, oh. And so that was amazing. And then the finale was going to the mountains to hang out with the gorillas. And that was so special. And so what you do is you show up, you're assigned a family. They tell you about the family. And so they it's almost Brady Bunch style where they have pictures and then they talk about each one's personalities. This one can be a little aggressive. We had a little baby. And here was the younger ones, and they talked about this entire family. And there's only a number of you who are allowed to go to visit this one family. And you're allowed, once you are there with them, you get 1 hour. That's it. So you may have to, we were lucky. We didn't have to hike that far, but sometimes you have to hike a few hours to find them. And we found them quicker. And they were up at the top of the mountain. And then we followed them, and then we just hung out with them. And we had rangers, we had porters who would carry your backpack and things like that for you. They would help you move the brush away to get a good look or get a good picture. And I like to call it breakfast with the gorillas, because they were just, when the chimpanzees were intimidating and just very muscular and intimidating, where the gorillas were, I mean, they do make that like gorilla, that sound, but to me, they were chilling. They were eating their breakfast. They're vegetarians. They're hanging out. They're big. And it was just really fascinating to be so close to them and hear them talking to each other. And some of the younger ones came up and touched the person next to me. Like they just walked up and touched them and like ran off like kids would do. And then we had one of the females came up to the silverback, and she sat in his lap, and she put her arms around him, and he put his arms around her, and they just kind of held each other and rocked back and forth. And that was so special. Even our ranger, who'd been there for 12 years, he's like, I've never seen a silverback hold one of his family members like that ever. And it was just so special. And yeah, you're connected. Yeah, it was great.
I would love to go add. It's definitely something on my list as well. And what I like about this is they are free. I mean, they are not, it's not like you keep enough distance not to sort of bother them too much. It's not like it's not like in where animals are kept, or in some places the elephants beaten into obedience. Those are free animals and they are just there and you go and visit them.
We spent some time with a doctor who was a researchist for gorillas the day before, and that was fascinating. And he shared how they habituate certain families, because there are other families out there that are not good candidates for visitation. So they have a number of families, and they very tightly control, once a day, and maybe not even every day this family gets a visit. And so they don't want to, and then they also use this time, like after we leave, they give them medications, they do whatever they need to, or they study them, or whatever. But the interaction is minimal, and not every family can support that. Either they haven't had enough contact, or the stress level, they notice it stresses out for personalities. So there are families they don't visit for that reason. So the ones you visit are open for visitors. And like you said, they are free. They move. I mean, we went down the mountain. We kept going down the mountain, and then they would find somewhere else, and they'd walk, and then we'd follow them, and then we'd catch up, and yeah, they were free to go. And yeah.
Beautiful. Would you say, I mean, you've traveled a lot, you've been to many places. Would you say that this is one of your most, because my podcast is called Most Memorable Journeys, would that be one of your most memorable trips, or what would have been your most memorable trip?
That is definitely in the top. I would say, I mean, I definitely have my favorite happy places, but as far as memorable trips, I would say that one is definitely at the top, or towards the top. Antarctica was totally blew me away. I would definitely put that one at the top. It was so mountainous. The blues of the icebergs were so blue. I went for the penguins and fell in love with the topography, and which surprised me because I don't like cold, not even a little. And that it was just, I mean, just majestic. That is just the word I just find, because the mountains and the snow and the icebergs and the whales and it was just majestic. And then the other top adventuresome was when I went to Jordan. And Wadi Rum was it was
I'm in
Bedouin
love with
tents.
Jordan.
Oh my gosh, those Bedouin tents were just, I just felt like, a princess on a spice trade camel, back in the day of Marco Polo. I mean, it was just really cool. And of course, Petra was great, but even going hiking up to the monastery and riding donkeys out, because Petra, the treasury, that's what we think Petra is, but there's so much more to Petra. And we saw it at night with luminaries there. And yeah, so that's definitely, so those are my top three, I think, adventures.
That's amazing. I have not been to Antarctica. That's also something that I would love to do. But Petra, because I am here in Cyprus, it's a 45 minutes flight,
Oh gosh.
And I've been a few times, and I think Jordan is something that I could visit every year.
Yeah.
It's something that especially in my situation, it is so beautiful, and it is such a shame that we are in this Middle Eastern situation where things are so difficult, because, Jordan I know that they are suffering at the moment. Tourism is down, because even though nothing is happening in Jordan, but people associate it with what's happening around it.
It's true. And even in the US, Jordan was a harder sell for me. And as passionate as I am about it and about my experience, it's a harder sell for at least the US clients that I know. So
yeah, I could imagine. And of course, also, sorry, I think I interrupted you, but it's also many people, when you come from the US, which is far away, to Jordan, you may want to go to another place as well. And it's difficult to combine it at the moment, because everything else around is in trouble.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So is there anything on you've done a lot. Is there anything on your list that you haven't done? Is there a dream list for Becky?
Yes, you know it. I really want to go to Egypt. I've never been to Egypt, and it's high, high, high on my list. I want to go up to Chiang Mai, Chiang Rai in Thailand. I just really, India intrigues me. I haven't been there. Mongolia intrigues me. I just with that nomadic life and the horses and the eagles and all that. That's really high on my list. And I think there are definitely places in Africa I haven't been on safari to that I'd really like to do as well. So I think my list is infinite because
Yeah,
I turn
that's
around
true
and I
because every time you do something, something new comes up, or you meet somebody who's been to another place that you haven't been, and then it fascinates you. You know, I'm there is this I can't tell you right now what it's called, but there is this thing on the internet where you can click how many countries you've been to, and I have been to so many countries, and then at the end, the result is that you've only been to half of the countries of the world. You know? So.
it's funny. I was speaking to a friend yesterday, and we were talking about one of those maps where you can put your push pins in, and I have one of not that kind, but I do have a virtual map that I put all the places I've been. And you would think I would look at it and go, wow, look at all the places I've been. And I just go, wow, there's a lot of open space.
Mm. Tell me,
So, yeah.
you do like you have tailor made or you organize tailored itineraries. Would you do that for anybody? Could anybody in the world contact you, or is that only for people in the US? Or is that restricted? How does it work?
It's not technically restricted. I've had clients, international clients, from time to time. So yes, I can work with anybody. I think sometimes when you get into some things like travel insurance and things like that, it can get there's a little more of a challenge with that, but we can work around that. But the majority of my travelers are for sure in the US, but they don't have to be. So, but yeah, but I work with individuals, groups of people who want to do things, and the majority of what we do is bespoke for
And
sure.
you know the good places and you get better rates.
I would say there are times where I get better rates, but usually I can add extra amenities or just the advice in my experience, just through my connections and things like that. So it's less, hey, I can get you a better deal, and more like, hey, I can help you put this together in a way that makes sense, the way that makes less stress. I think sometimes when people travel, they underestimate the amount of time it takes to switch destinations. So I see some people switching every other day and like making major switches, at least in the US. And I'm always trying to tell people to slow it down, slow it down. I'm like, you're traveling 8 hours to spend 8 hours to see something, and
Mhm.
put down some little baby roots somewhere. So
Yeah,
it's
we make
your
fun.
memories.
You see, in Europe, I'm from Lucerne. We make fun, or we used to make fun of American tourists. You know, there's this saying, if it's, what is it? If it's Tuesday, it must be Rome, or because there
Yeah.
was a different place every day.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know if these, I'm sure these trips still exist, but I think people have started embracing it a little more and taking in
I
things a
agree.
little more, and not just, but there's plenty of people who are, country counters, lots of young influencers whose only aim is to be able to say to how many places they've been to.
Correct. Correct. And if I mean, and I'm not. People have different perspectives and different goals when traveling for sure, and everyone's goal is a valid one. And I also think that there's a lot to be said for spending time in a destination. I spent a month in Burgundy in April with friends, and we went wine tasting and we worked some and this, that, and the other. And you just it becomes a piece of you. The boulangerie you like to go to,
Mm.
and the little cafe that makes I mean, it just so much, it's a different way to travel.
Yes, I totally agree. And it's sort of, talking to locals and becoming a little bit a part of it. In all the travels that you've done, have you ever felt unsafe? Have you had an experience where you felt like, this is not going very well?
Yeah, I definitely have. I've been to, there have been a couple of instances where I was in a Caribbean country and I had done something on a whim with a friend and, oh, let's go here. And then you're in the middle of it and you're like, oh, this was not a good idea. And then traveling is a lot of times I travel alone as a woman. Traveling, sometimes there are challenges with that. And I have had places, even like in Florence, I had someone who I think was a young man who was mentally ill, and he followed me. I'm just wandering the back streets in the Altrano and just taking some pictures and it was in the middle of the day. And that was a little challenging. I did all my little tricks of crossing the street and slowing down, letting him get in front of me and not behind me. And it just, and I was a little, I finally got up to a place and found a gelateria and popped in there, and he waited outside. I was like, oh, this was not good. So I think those times, just like where we live, those times can happen anywhere, but it can happen.
Mm-hmm.
We just
Mm-hmm.
have to be aware of our surroundings and make good choices.
Yes, and I think especially when we are younger, and I'm sure if you look back at that trip through Europe when you were very young, I think I don't, it definitely happens to me. I look back and I think, oh my God, I was so lucky. You
Yeah,
know,
for
I
sure.
mean, we did a lot of things that could have, but when you think that I have two kids, I think if I knew that my kids would be doing that, I wouldn't like it. But
Hmm.
you look back and you were just very lucky.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, this last incident that happened in Florence happened a couple of years ago, and I had become of the mindset of, I'm in my mid 50s. What do I need to worry about? I mean, nobody's going to be like trying to pick me up, and he wasn't trying to pick me up, but and so I think I tend to get a little braver sometimes as I get older in some situations, and it just reminded me that that I just need to be aware. And but like you said, you look back and go, wow,
I
that
know.
probably wasn't very safe for me to do those things I did in my 20s. But
Yeah, it's funny what you're saying now because I was the age thing. I always say when you get to a certain age as a woman, you become invisible. Nobody notices you
yeah,
anymore. But I think
yeah.
that's a lot of freedom as well, don't you think? It's on the one side, okay, nobody looks at you anymore, but on the other hand, it gives you this freedom to be you and to just, be and say whatever you want.
Oh, for sure. And it's both sides of that coin, because I do mourn that woman that I was in my 20s and 30s, even possibly early 40s, where you were seen, and now in your mid 50s it is different. But like you said, and now it's like, it's like if I'm changing clothes in a store and the curtain doesn't close just right or whatever, in my younger years, I'd be all like freaked out. And I'm like, hey, you know what? If they're going to watch this, go for it.
Yeah, it's
Nobody
funny.
wants to see this.
Yeah, I think it's that's how we should look at aging. We should look at it as, becoming free. It's a lot, it's enjoying the freedom of not having to worry about so many things anymore. I think that's the beauty about getting older.
Yeah, I think so. I really, I think so.
So, Becky, we're coming to the end, but I want you to tell the people who are listening, who are afraid to go somewhere, what would you tell them? There's lots of people who would love, they watch us, they are even in some of the groups that we are in some Facebook groups or other groups, and they see other people travel or other women travel, but they are afraid. What's the best way to take away the fear?
I think finding a group locally to go with, or with some adventuresome company like a Backroads or Butterfield and Robinson or something, where you're joining a really dynamic, active group. But I would just say I see a lot of people, especially women, but people who really want to do something and they don't go because they can't find someone who can go at the time they can go. And I
Or
would
not, or
say,
can't afford that. There are so
or
many
can't
things that,
afford
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah. And it's take the baby step. So maybe you're not going to go completely solo here or for a month, but take a week. Go to Paris. Go to Paris. Go find, have some things planned and have some wandering time planned as well, that you can wander on your own, but take a baby step where you feel safe and start building on that. Because if you have the wanderlust and you want to see things and you're mourning that, then do it, because you may wait forever and you may miss some of these things that you really want to see. Now, if you don't care, that's totally fine. But if there are things that are just on your heart that you want to experience, do it. Take a baby step, get comfortable. And I think you'll learn a lot about yourself. And the hardest part for me is actually dinner time, because I'm sitting at a restaurant. I'm like, well, now what? And I don't want to scroll on my phone. And, but be brave. I like, for me, I like to go to a restaurant that has a tasting menu when I'm by myself. Maybe not every night if I can't afford it, but I try to, because then I know I have 6 courses, like tiny courses that are coming out, and I get to interact with the waiter and the sommelier, and I've got some interaction, and to me that's helpful. But I have to be brave and be comfortable with myself.
Beautiful. I mean, those are really, really good tips. And there is a book, I never remember the name, but the things that people regret on their deathbed. One of those things is not the things we did, but the things we didn't do. So
Yeah.
just do it. I think that's an excellent end to this lovely podcast episode. Thank you so much for being on Most Memorable Journeys, Becky Lukovic.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
If you enjoy my podcast, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. You will find all the information in the show notes.